What's up guys, it's Mike with Eye for Reptiles, back with another video today. Today is the 28th day of Jam-Packed July, and it's Saturday. So you know what that means? That's right, it's a Herp highlight video. The unfortunate thing about today's Herp highlight video is that it's the last one for Jam-Packed July. I say that from a perspective that is both happy and sad, because honestly it does suck that Jam-Packed July is coming to an end. But it means that I can have a life again. I can actually go do stuff and not have to worry, which is nice considering recent circumstances. So yeah, I mean, it's both a positive and a negative thing. But anyways, as you can tell by the title, we're going over blue-tongue skink care in today's Herp highlight, specifically my Maruki blue-tongue skink, which is a Tytula gigas evanescens, or the Maruki blue-tongue skink. Many of you guys know and love my boy Sky, so I figured he would make for a good candidate for the last Herp highlight of Jam-Packed July. On that note, please let me know in the comment section down below if you would like for me to continue the Herp highlight series. I might only continue it into like once a month or something like that. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. But if you aren't familiar with how these care sheets or Herp highlight videos are laid out, let me spell it out for you. Sorry, that was my southern boy coming out. Basically what we're doing in the Herp highlights is we go through the first few minutes is how I got the animal that I'm talking about, in this case Sky, and then in the second half we go into more details about husbandry and natural history of the animal in question. If you guys are only in it for the blue-tongue skink care, you can click up here. There'll be a time for you guys to check out, and that time will be where I start talking about the actual care and husbandry of blue-tongue skinks. As per usual, I want you guys to know that this is not the only research that you should be doing if you are considering getting a blue-tongue skink. Consider it part of your toolkit. Consider it part of your research kit. This is not the only research you should be doing before getting a reptile. So make sure you do other research as well before deciding to get a blue-tongue skink of any kind. Now that the PSA is out of the way and you guys that have skipped over this part will never see this, for those of you guys that stay, we can talk about the blue-tongue skink and how I got Sky. Now, unlike most of my animals, Sky is really the only one that I consider a rescue. I use that term a little loosely, but let me go ahead and explain to you what I mean. Most likely, Sky's origins start in Maruki. He's likely a wild-caught blue-tongue skink. That is due to the exportation of blue tongues from Indo, and it happens, it still does, which is why the captive market for these guys is pretty much zero in Canada. That then means that most of the babies, even in Petlands, PetSmarts, everywhere, are wild caught. They're not going to advertise that, but that is the case. The fact that they are brought in from the wild all the time on a regular basis, and the fact that I got it from Petland, kind of conflates together as it is wild caught, because there's no way Petland's going to be paying the prices for a captive bred blue-tongue skink when they could buy one for a half cost, and that be it wild, and then they don't have to disclose it or care. That's the new owner's issue. I've had Sky, or known Sky, for pretty much his whole life. I've had him for about 5 years, and he was in Petland for probably 8 months to a year before that. But he was just a little tiny guy when we first got him in. So the majority of his life is in captivity, so he'd be like an LTC or long-term captive, if that kind of sways your opinion about whatever wild caught that you're thinking of right now. That's good. The reason why I consider it a rescue is because he was being kept in a very small cage with extremely limited food options that were really not suitable for how big he was getting. And now after some deliberation between the assistant manager of Petland at the time and the reptile manager at the time, they ended up coming together and deciding that it was time to get rid of this blue tongue no matter what it took. Don't take that the wrong way. They weren't going to kill it or anything like that, but they basically came up with the plan that the manager, or the assistant manager, was going to give me his discount in order for me to apply to both the lizard and its whole setup. Now, on a side note, the manager's discount is 50%, so that is a huge savings when considering buying something like a blue-tongue skink. Especially in Canada, when even Indonesian orders are about $600 to $700 Canadian. It's ridiculous, I know. The next time I went in, I ended up buying the skink and the whole setup. I don't remember what the full cost was, but if you're interested in watching the video, I will try and find it and leave it up here for you guys to go check it out. It's a very old video, and I guess you can kind of tell how well my videos have aged over time. as well as how poorly I have. So me taking it from a place of extremely limited space, limited nutrition, and overall poor conditions in general, and bringing it home to a much more spacious enclosure, very appropriate diet, and just the love of a family is what I consider a rescue. Don't get me wrong, this is not like it was on the brink of death and I ended up bringing him back to life. No, that's not the case. So that said, Sky wasn't suffering yet. Enough about Sky and how I got him. You guys kind of have a general backstory. I've had him for 5 years. I got him from Petland. He's in a much better place now. Why don't we move on to their husbandry and the care of Tytula gigas evanescens. The genus of Tytula, and that is Tyliqua, not the other stuff that you're thinking of, or blue-tongued skinks in general, is a genus that is large-bodied, terrestrial, diurnal, omnivorous, and that display viviparity. If you understood any of those words, then you are probably not a small child. You might be more educated than that. Good for you. But for those of you that didn't understand anything I just said, I'll break it down into much longer form sentences to get across the same point. What that all meant is that they are large, heavy-bodied lizards that are active during the day, found at ground level and not in the trees, and that they'll also pretty much eat anything that crosses in front of them and can fit in their mouth, anything from leafy greens to small mammals. And something that sets them apart from many other reptiles is that instead of producing eggs, these guys actually produce live, fully formed young. Now, one of the crucial things of understanding blue tongues is why they are called blue-tongued skinks. Obviously, that's because of their blue tongues, and many people think that it is because of their display posture that they use against predators. What that involves is if a predator is chasing them down, instead of running around with their sausage-like bodies and T-Rex-like arms, what they're going to do instead is turn around, face the predator, puff up with air, and open their mouth wide open with this blue striking tongue. That's actually a super good anti-predation tactic because it works. I mean, even humans are terrified when a blue tongue does that. However, this might not be the intended use of their tongue. This is blasphemy, you say. What could it be? Well, after digging through the scientific literature, a study published in 2015 by Abramjan et al. Looked at the reasons why blue tongues use their tongue, and their analysis garnered some interesting results. The results showed that the tongue and their oral surface in general is actually a UV reflector. What's interesting about the blue tongue is that it is less reflective or more conspicuous than the reflection shown by that of a pink-tongued animal, which led them to hypothesize that it might serve as a signal similar to that of UV patches in other lizards. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look up UV blue patches in lizards and you should find some information about it. This is hypothesized because blue tongues are a diurnal species and diurnal lizards have a more UV biased sight than many other animals. So with that said, the signal might have more to do with the animals signaling in between their own species rather than to another species. Meaning that it is some form of long-distance visual communication in order to avoid competition amongst each other. And if that hypothesis is correct, then it would suggest that the anti-predation theory is just a side benefit of having a cool blue tongue to talk to your homies with. Okay, I know, that was super nerdy, I'm sorry, but I really hope you guys learned something. I definitely, after reading that, learned something, so I hope you guys learned that as well. It's kind of cool when science meets hobby and you can combine the two really seamlessly to educate you guys. Now on the captive care side of things, I'm going to be talking specifically about Merauke blue-tongued skinks or Indonesian blue-tongued skinks. They all have very similar care. So if you guys are here for the Aussie crowd and you're looking for northern or eastern or all the other different kinds of blue-tongued skink care that are found in Australia, this might not be the video for you. However, I encourage you to learn more about other species of animals, so stick around. Merauke blue-tongued skinks are the longest species of blue tongues, reaching an average length between 26 to 28 inches, and unlike their Aussie counterparts, they like quite high humidity. Due to their larger size, I recommend the minimum size for a blue-tongued skink, or at least a Merauke blue-tongued skink, be a 40-gallon breeder that measures 36 inches long, 18 front to back, and then 17 inches tall. But larger is always better. For example, I have Sky in a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot enclosure, And while it's not perfectly laid out for him just yet, I'm working closely with a friend of mine to get some backgrounds done and hopefully incorporate it into his setup. So that said, just keep in mind, rather than adding height, you want to add more surface area. That'll benefit the blue tongue more than adding height will. When it comes to picking out a tank, I would strongly recommend, especially for these guys, that you look at either a PVC tank or a wood tank that is pretty much all enclosed. An enclosed tank helps with the heat retention as well as the humidity retention, as opposed to a glass tank with a screen lid that the second you missed it and it gets warm, all that humidity is just going to escape the tank and into your environment rather than into their environment. Talking about temperatures and humidity, why don't we actually talk about them? Their basking temperatures should be between about 95 to 100, which is 35 degrees Celsius to about 37 degrees Celsius. And the ambient around their tank should be about 80 degrees Fahrenheit or 27 degrees Celsius. And humidity at the same time should be kept at 60% or above. So like I said, keeping humidity in the tank is going to be an issue if you live in a climate like me, Calgary, Alberta, which is basically a plain land and not great for retaining humidity. As far as achieving those temperatures, I personally use a radiant heat panel on Sky, but you can just use a standard halogen bulb or any real reptile basking bulb to achieve those temperatures. In addition to that, based on many kind of, I guess, anecdotal tests, blue tongues do benefit from having a light period and then a dark period with bright light during the day. This helps them kind of regulate and set their bodies to a standard timer rather than just kind of going dark all day, all night. Now, I personally use UVB on all of my animals because I believe that the proper amount of UVB can benefit all reptiles. So I use a UVB bulb in addition to just a standard kind of daylight bulb in my tank. That's not necessarily universally recommended, but that's what I'm going to recommend to you guys today, is just provide it. Make sure they're able to escape the UVB radiation, but I would still provide it for them. Now for the inside of the tank, I'm talking substrate. For my substrate, I use a mixture of 50% jungle mix from Zilla and 50% cypress mulch from Zoomed, or the forest floor bedding, whatever you want to call it. That is what I find retains humidity very well in my enclosure. That's what I'd recommend to all of you to use for your Indonesian blue tongue as well. As for decorations, as most basic reptile keepers know, you want to have a basking spot and several hides for them to use. Now, I know that my tank is not perfect, but I'm really working hard to get some really cool stuff on the way for Sky. I'm super excited to make videos about it and let you guys know. Fingers are crossed right now. I don't know if it's 100% happening, but if it does, oh man, you guys will not be complaining that his tank is plain anymore. So at this point, we've covered pretty much everything. We've covered the natural history, we've covered most of their husbandry, but the one thing we haven't talked about is food. There are many schools of thought when it comes to feeding your blue tongue skink, anywhere from cat and dog food to homebrew, which is a term coined by T.C. Houston, basically means making your own fresh food for your blue tongue. I personally am a subscriber to mostly homebrew with some dog food. And my homebrew consists of 50% greens and some veggies, not very many, 40% proteins, whether that's from small animal protein or ground turkey, whatever you can provide, and about 10% fruits. And this is per feeding, so he might get like 2 blueberries or whatever mixed in with his meal. But if you guys are wondering what food is safe for your skink, I'll leave a link in the description down below for you guys to go check out and explore for yourselves. There are several things that you should really stay away from when it comes to feeding your blue tongue. The 3 big no-nos are rhubarb, avocado, and onions. These are 3 things that typically aren't good for most animals, so if you're feeding any of those things, you might want to rethink your school of thought. Now, I feed that mixture of homebrew 1 to 2 times a week, typically only once a week, and I feed him enough for him to have a full serving one day and then come back the next day and eat again. Then I replace it after that second day. In addition to feeding those several foods that I shared earlier, I'll feed typically once or twice a month a dog food, which is, you can see right here, this is the Signatures brand dog food. This is the kangaroo formula, and I also feed him the duck formula. Those are the few that I use. I know this is good for them. However, they have just removed the whole calcium, so make sure if you're feeding this stuff, you are dosing it with a form of calcium. Now, speaking of dosing, I pretty much dose on every feeding. I use both the Arcadia Earth Pro A, which is a multivitamin mix and some bee pollen and stuff that does not have D3, except extremely trace amounts that are found in the bee pollen. And I also use the Calcium MG Pro from Arcadia, which is calcium and magnesium, again without D3. And typically about once a month, I'll provide a little sprinkling of D3 just to make sure he's getting enough. Occasionally, as you saw in this video, I will also feed whole animal protein, like a couple fuzzies or a pinky or eggs, that kind of stuff. But that is certainly not every feeding. It's just to vary his diet. That wraps things up on the last episode of Herp Highlight during the month of Jam-Packed July. So I really hope you enjoyed, but not only enjoyed, I hope that you guys actually learned something during these videos. I have a blast filming them, and I hope you guys enjoy watching them. I think they're more in depth than a lot of other care sheets out there, so while you are staring at my face a lot of the time, I think there's good information behind it. So with that being said, if you want to follow me a little more closely, I will be on Instagram and on Facebook. Links are in the description for you guys to go check out. That's just another avenue to contact me, message with me, interact with me. That's up to you though. If you like this video, make sure you click that like button, and while you're down there, leave a comment in the comment section regarding the future of Herp Highlights, some other random videos that you might want to see from me, and if you want a full video on blue tongue nutrition. I think this is an important topic, and it will take a long time to cover, but I think it would be very beneficial to the hobby. While you're down there leaving that comment, you can also take the time to click that subscribe button and play Ding Dong Ditch with the doorbell next to it. That way you get notified every time I post a video or go live, which by the way is every Sunday, 10 a.m.-ish. I want to thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you tomorrow for a live stream. Later.